You felt it the second the trainer walked toward the sideline. A small movement, a tight hand, and the entire afternoon shifted from routine to a problem that lived in slow motion. Aaron Rodgers left the Bengals game holding his left wrist, and for a team that's been trying to hold its season together with duct tape and determination, that moment immediately became the kind of cliffhanger every contender dreads. Now, as the Steelers flip the page to a Week 13 showdown with the Buffalo Bills, Mike Tomlin says he's got great optimism that Rodgers will be back under center. Reuters. This isn't pure optimism theater. The medical note that set all of this off was specific. Early x-rays showed a small fracture in Rodgers' left wrist, the kind of break you can sometimes manage without surgery, but that still demands caution, protection, and a very particular kind of wariness. Rodgers missed the Bears game as the team chose prudence over pride, then returned to practice later in the week as a limited participant wearing a stabilizer. The narrative here is equal parts hope and risk management. The team is trying to thread the needle between having their veteran leader available and making sure one bad play doesn't turn a manageable injury into a season ender. NFL.com, you can't fully take the drama out of this with injury reports and quotes, though there's a human temperature to it. Rodgers is 41, playing on the tail end of a Hall of Fame resume that still changes how teammates move in the pocket and how opponents plan. His presence alters the room, his cadence, his eye contact, the way players listen when he says a two-word correction. That texture matters in a division race that's absurdly tight. Pittsburgh 6-5, and every snap matters as they try to keep pace with Baltimore and the rest of the AFC. Having Rodgers available would be both strategic and spiritual for this locker room. Reuters, for Flockers. But don't make the mistake of thinking returning is simple. A quarterback can be available and not be fully himself. Wrist pain, even on the non-throwing hand, changes how a quarterback grips, how he rides the pocket, and how comfortable he is with the violent dot. Small actions that make elite throws look easy. Tomlin has emphasized functionality and comfort. If Rodgers can do the job without sacrificing long-term health, the coaching staff will let him. If not, they'll protect him and let Mason Rudolph handle the keys. That balance is the whole story this week. Pittsburgh Steelers, Rudolph's cameo last week turned the whole calculus into something practical. He started in Chicago, showed poise, and reminded everyone that backups aren't just placebos. They're the emergency brakes you hope you never need. Still, Rudolph's solid outing doesn't change the scoreboard math. Rodgers' skill set and leadership shift the offense's ceiling. Pittsburgh's coaches have to decide if they want the known high ceiling now with the risk of aggravation or the lower risk path of keeping Rodgers healthy for a long run. That's a decision that will be judged both by the next Sunday's scoreboard and by how the season finishes. NFL.com. Let's talk stakes. Buffalo brings Josh Allen, a lion of a quarterback who forces opponents to be perfect in time and space. This isn't a get-your-feet-wet matchup. It's a test of whether a team can protect its leader and make him comfortable enough to beat an elite opponent. For Pittsburgh, a win here would be a season-defining spark. A loss could turn tight division math into an uphill slog. That's why Tomlin's great optimism isn't idle bravado. It's a signal the team believes the rehab is trending the right way and that Rodgers can contribute in a meaningful, not just ceremonial way. Reuters. There's also the less glamorous chess game to watch, game plan adjustments. If Rodgers plays but isn't 100%, expect more quick-tempo, shotgun-based sequences, more two-back formations, or packaged plays that limit violent wrist contact and reduce the number of times he takes snaps under center. Coaches will look to shield him with schematic choices. Quicker throws, more play action off short dropbacks, and clearly defined progressions that don't require miraculous escapes. If Rudolph starts again, the playbook may tilt more conservative, leaning on run concepts and controlled passing windows. The kind of football that keeps the ball moving while minimizing high-variance plays. Either route is a messaging moment about how this franchise intends to fight for the next 2 months. ESPN.com. We should also say this plainly. Rodgers wants to play. He's still a competitor in every bone and sentence, the kind of player who feels better by being on the field than watching from the sideline. That competitive instinct matters, but it's not the only variable. The Steelers' medical staff, the coaches, and Rodgers himself all have to weigh the long game, and the NFL's calendar does not forgive short-sightedness. A single stubborn start this week could mean a longer absence down the stretch. That's the invisible ledger teams balance when a veteran's career arc and a season's ambitions collide. Pittsburgh Steelers. But let's not write the script for Week 13 just yet. Football is a sport of small details. A nailed-on route here, a clean protection there, a third down conversion that changes the tone of a half. Rodgers' return would add those marginal gains. If he's at 90% of himself, Pittsburgh has a better chance. If he's at 60% and trying to will the offense into existence, the risk grows. That's the practical reality Tomlin is asking us to trust when he says he's comfortable with Rodgers' trajectory. Pittsburgh Steelers, what you carry out of this week isn't a final answer, but a mood. Cautious optimism threaded with real peril. Watch the practice reports, listen to how Rodgers moves in interviews, and see how the playbook reads on Sunday. The result will tell you more about this team than any pregame press conference can. For now, the image that lingers is simple and human. A veteran quarterback balancing pain and pride, a head coach protecting a season's arc, and a franchise holding its breath in a division that won't wait. Reuters, either way, the next whistle will be louder than the optimism. If Rodgers plays and wins, this week will be remembered as the moment the Steelers managed risk and tilted the season back in their favor. If he sits and Rudolph sparks a surprise, they'll have another storyline about depth, about adaptability, about how teams survive when Plan A snaps. That's why in the NFL, every injury update is also a small plot twist, and why for Pittsburgh, this week feels like a decisive chapter rather than a footnote. Aaron Rodgers is trending toward a return. Coach Mike Tomlin told reporters he has great optimism. Rodgers will be ready to start when the Steelers host the Buffalo Bills next Sunday. A striking update after Rodgers sat out in Chicago with a fractured left wrist. This is Rodgers' first extended injury test since arriving in Pittsburgh, and Tomlin's tone was deliberately cautious but upbeat. The expectation is that Rodgers will be available, even if he'll be managed in practice early in the week. Reuters. That matters for two reasons. One, Rodgers isn't just a veteran presence, he's the engine of this offense. Through 10 games in a new city, he's thrown for 1,969 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, numbers that have masked the bumps of integrating into a new scheme and a new supporting cast. Two, the timing couldn't be tougher. The Steelers draw Josh Allen and the Bills, an opponent whose identity is built on explosive plays and field-flipping capability. Having Rodgers in the lineup moves the needle from survive to compete. Reuters, last week the Steelers rolled with Mason Rudolph against the Bears. Rudolph acquitted himself well, 24 of 31 passing for 171 yards, a touchdown and an interception, and the offense rallied late before ultimately falling 31-28. That outing gives Pittsburgh some short-term depth confidence. Rudolph can manage games and engineer late drives, but the stylistic difference between Rudolph and Rodgers is real. Rudolph is a structure-first quarterback. Rodgers is a playmaker who stretches defenses and extends plays. Expect the playbook to look different depending on which man is under center. ESPN.com. If Rodgers is active, don't expect reckless heroics. The medical staff and coaches will balance his competitiveness against risk management, especially for a 41-year-old veteran with a fractured wrist. Look for design choices that limit his exposure. Boots and rollouts that let him avoid heavy crowds, quick-release passing concepts that reduce pressure on the wrist, and packaged plays that create easy reads. In short, his presence raises ceiling, but the Steelers will be smart about how they ride it. ESPN.com. If Rodgers can't go, the blueprint is simple and less glamorous. Run more, protect the passer, and coast on structure. Expect more Max Pro looks, short passing concepts, screens, and a heavier reliance on the run game to control clock and limit turnover risk. Rudolph proved he can manage under